The Feather Truth, a foul play on human greed. It was a beautiful spring morning on Featherfield Farm. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and Clucky the chicken poked her head out of the coop, ruffling her feathers. "Good morning, my feathery friends," she called out. "Doesn't it just make your wattle wiggle with joy to have another glorious day pecking around the farm?" "Not really," grumbled Drumstick, waddling out behind her. "Every day is the same humdrum existence for us chickens. Walk around, peck at some corn, lay an egg or two. What's so glorious about that?" "Well, aren't you just a ball of sunshine this morning?" Clucky clucked, rolling her eyes. The other hens began emerging from the coop, stretching their wings. "He's got a point though," said Chickaletta. "Don't you ever wonder why we're here? What's the purpose of our lives as chickens?" The chickens looked at each other quizzically. This was certainly an existential question for a flock of birds who spent most of their time foraging for feed. "Well, I assume it's to lay eggs for the kind farmers, Eugene and Edna," suggested Egbert. "That's what my mother always told me, we lay eggs for the humans' breakfast." "But then why did the farmers put that rooster Winston in our coop a few months ago?" asked Buffy, gesturing at the preening rooster strutting around them. "I have a theory about that." "Yes, please enlighten us with your intellectually superior chicken mind," Drumstick said sarcastically. Buffy ruffled her feathers indignantly. "Well, I was just going to say, maybe the farmers wanted Winston to, fertilize some of our eggs so they could hatch into baby chicks." The chickens gasped and looked at each other nervously. "You mean, so the farmers could raise us for food?" Chickaletta exclaimed. A few of the hens began to panic. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, let's not get ahead of ourselves here," Clucky said, trying to restore order. "Buffy's theory is just speculation. Why would the kind farmers Eugene and Edna want to raise us for food? We're their beloved egg-laying hens." "Yeah, that doesn't make any sense," agreed Egbert. "We're like their children. They take such good care of us. I'm sure there's a perfectly harmless explanation for Winston being here." Winston the rooster cocked his head and stared at them bemusedly. "You hens are all cooped up in your little world, aren't you? Why else would humans domesticate animals if not to eventually eat them?" The chickens fell silent, turning Winston's words over in their small chicken minds. Could it be true? "Don't be ridiculous," Clucky finally scoffed. "Eugene and Edna love us. They wouldn't eat us any more than humans would eat their own babies." "I don't know," Chickaletta said nervously. "My cousin Pauline told me some crazy stories about what happens at those big chicken factory farms." The chickens began bickering amongst themselves, flapping their wings and squawking loudly in heated debate about their purpose and fate. They didn't notice Eugene approaching until his shadow fell over the coop. "Morning, girls. What's with all the ruckus?" Eugene chuckled heartily, tossing some feed out for the chickens. The flock immediately stopped arguing and happily began pecking at the fresh grains. "Oh, nothing, we were just having a lively discussion about chicken philosophy," Clucky said, winking at Eugene as the hens giggled. Eugene grinned and shook his head amusedly. "You silly birds. Well, enjoy your breakfast and keep laying those delicious eggs for Edna and me." With that, he strolled off, whistling a tune. The chickens eyed each other uneasily once he was gone. See? Just eggs. He didn't mention anything about eating us, Egbert said, seemingly reassured. Yeah, but he also called us silly birds like we're too stupid to understand the truth, Buffy pointed out. The chickens continued debating and bickering amongst themselves for weeks after. Some became convinced humans were just fattening them up to slaughter them for meat. Others remained in denial, certain their beloved farmers would never harm them. Finally, one fateful morning, the entire flock was shooed into a large metal crate by Eugene and Edna. Panicking, the chickens scattered and ran around frantically, squawking in terror. It's happening. They're going to eat us all. Drumstick cried. Oh, don't be so melodramatic, Clucky said sternly, though she too felt uneasy. I'm sure the farmers are just moving us to a nicer coop. Yes, that must be it. A few hours later, the crate arrived at a huge building with a sign that read Bucky's Bucolic Butchery and Processing Plant. The chickens fell into a horrified hush as the meaning of those words sunk in. One by one, the flock was pulled from the crate and taken down a chute toward an ominous machine at the end. The last ones could hear the sickening sounds of the first unlucky chickens being slaughtered. Buffy was one of the last in line. Well, she said, her voice trembling as she listened to the thunking sounds coming from the machine. I regret to admit my theory was correct after all. Drumstick looked at her grimly. Yup. Should have listened to you instead of being in such denial. So this is how it ends? Chickaletta said sadly, peering ahead at the whirring blades awaiting them. Also those greedy humans could have a chicken dinner? Seems that way, Clucky said, a single tear dropping from her eye. I can't believe Eugene and Edna deceived us all this time. I thought we meant more to them than just food. We were just a paycheck to those humans, Drumstick spat bitterly. All they cared about was padding their nests with cash from our slaughter. So much for the kind farmers, Egbert said, shaking his head. More like a couple of con artists buttering us up to be turned into McNuggets. As the line moved cruelly forward, Buffy turned and gave her friends one last mournful look. Well, chickens, I suppose we should have eaten more grain while we had the chance. The doomed birds nodded solemnly as they accepted their unappetizing fate to become a meal for the very humans they had trusted. All for the greed and gluttony of the animals at the very top of the food chain.